I'm going to tell you the story of Peter and the Wolf. Now, usually before this piece begins, the speaker explains how each person or animal in the story is described by a certain instrument of the orchestra. I'm sure you know all that already, don't you? Right.
Freezing water expands and splits rock formation. The result is a loose, moving mass, progressing slowly downward.
They squeak too. All right. Whoa. So it's the second time you've been up here today.
Yeah.
All right. So
Thanks
I've got
for having me.
No problem. So I've got some questions I wrote down for you. Let's pull them up real quick. The first one is, so you've started this new thing called Milk, and well, how many of you know about Milk? Raise your hand real quick.
Awesome.
So I'd say about half, right? Okay, so for the half that don't, why don't you quickly tell them what is it and why did you start it?
Sure. So basically, about 6 months ago, I left Digg as my full-time gig and decided to start something new. At the time, I didn't have plans to start something new. I was just going to kind of continue doing angel investing and figure it out from there. My old creative director, Daniel Burka, was working over at TinySpec for Stuart Butterfield, who had created Flickr, and he was doing all the design for them. And he was talking about potentially making the jump to another company and just doing something new, not because he didn't like Glitch and TinySpec, but he's just not a big hardcore gamer.
Right.
And so we worked very well together, and I think that Daniel is very much a good product guy as well. So he's one of those guys that when we were working in the early days of Digg, we'd bounce ideas off each other and could create some really cool kind of innovative products.
And he's basically a founder with you, co-founder.
Yeah, so I found out that he was going to leave and or do something else, and he started naming off some pretty small startups, because I thought he was going to go to, Twitter or Facebook, something like that. And so I said to him, if you're going to actually entertain doing something at a smaller startup, let's talk about doing something together. So we got together, figured out that we want to do some mobile stuff. We had a few ideas on the table, and we said, rather than go out and raise some money under just one idea, meaning going out and pitching investors and saying, this is the idea I want to do, we said, let's go out there and just be straight up with them and say, we're not going to ever do a pivot. We're just going to be an incubator of our own ideas.
Right.
So it's more kind of like a labs project for us. So we have a very small team in San Francisco, a team of 6 people total, including myself.
Cool.
We raised a little bit of cash. That'll give us a couple years of playing around with some stuff. And we announced our first product unintentionally. It's funny because sometimes things leak because you're like, hey, Arrington, hey, post it. This was not on purpose. It was a little bit premature. But it went out there, and so our first product is going to be called Oink. It's an iOS iPhone
Which
app.
no one knows, right? Is this the first time?
No, it said Oink the name has been mentioned before, but I think that's because someone found a trademark that we had put in our name. But for us, we just wanted to be really nimble and launch a couple things and see what happens.
So you're focusing a lot on iOS, right? Or purely on iOS?
Initially, for the mobile stuff, yeah.
Okay.
It's not to say we won't do web apps, but there will be a web component to Oink, but initially we want to launch with just iOS.
Got it. So I tweeted out and asked if anyone had questions for you since I was talking to you, and someone said, with the fragmentation of mobile between...
Sorry.
There's a duck in your pocket, right?
Apologies.
So with the fragmentation of mobile with iOS, Android, Winmo, and HTML5, why focus just on iOS?
Well, I feel as though Android, it's tricky because it's got this insane install base, and you hear about all these people. It's activating 500,000 devices a day, whatever it is now.
Supposedly
and so
beating
it's
iOS pretty bad.
tempting. What's that? It's supposedly, but I feel as though, and this is just my gut. I don't have any data to back this up. I'm sure there's tons of data out there, but I feel as though you've got the hardcore geeks that are into Android, and they'll be awesome to use your product. And then you have this really long tail of like mass consumers that are getting a cheap $99 phone that have no idea what they're doing, what an app store is, or the fact that they just know like I have a cool smartphone, right?
They don't know it's Android or...
Right, exactly. So I feel like, you know, I have some developers that have products on both, and they will say that they're getting a lot more traction on iOS, and they're actually making money on iOS, and that Android kind of has to be this freemium kind of model. So I'm just, you know, we definitely do an Android app if something starts to catch on iOS. But it's just the early adopters, the people I'm looking to target will initially be on iOS.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess the App Store model is so strong there that it's straightforward. So we talked a little bit about culture. So after Tony's talk yesterday, we talked about culture. We went out to dinner, and I was sort of saying, the main problem, the main enemy of culture, I think, is busyness. So all of us are busy, right? So especially if you're in a young startup, it feels like you can't move fast enough, right? And I asked you, how do you curate culture at Milk? And I thought that was interesting. So why don't you share a little bit more about that?
So I think that there's a couple things. One, when you're a very small team, I don't know how to approach this. I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff out at you.
Let's go for it.
Basically, you know, we're a team of 6. So, you know, at Digg, we grew to 30, 40, 50 people. And I noticed after about 15 or 20 people, you start to lose track of who's doing what, right? So there's like multiple meetings going on at the same time, and you're not in every meeting, and decisions are getting made. Not everyone knows what the other person is doing. And so, you know, as management, it's like your job to come in and make sure that everyone's up to speed on what's going on. And it's this constant kind of like reinforcing of the mission and what you're trying to build. I try to make sure that everyone is involved in pretty much every decision, but not like
when you're small or when you're Digg size?
When you're small.
Okay.
So it's not like you got to be careful because it can quickly turn into like too many cooks in the kitchen. So you have to know when to like call it off. Right. But I make sure that we only have 1 meeting a week, 2 maybe. Right. And then just have everyone around the table, and that can oftentimes, you know, start in the afternoon and then lead into dinner or drinks afterwards. And so everyone feels like they're part of that decision-making process, which I think is very important. And
are many folks married with kids in that group of 6?
None have kids. Right. 2 are engaged. Because
what we're finding is when people get married, they tend to need to go home after work, and it's harder to hang out. So
it's true. I mean, we pick like a day a week where we all try to go. There's a bar like 2 blocks away, so we all try to walk down and spend some time together. But and then we also do lunches together as well, which helps out. But there's other things that we do around the office. Like I feel as though, you know, you're competing with like Google and Facebook and some of these companies that have these just insane you know, budgets for all kinds of things, from facilities like dental care. And like, I'm not going to have a dentist working out of our office.
Why? Why is that?
So it's like, you know, what can you do that's a little bit different? So, you know, we have things like, I put together a flower budget. So everyone in the office can buy up to $50 in flowers a month, and they can either bring it to the office or bring it to their house. And the idea there being like it just makes the office feel more alive, just a better environment, and it also makes those people happy. Nice. We do things like we do a $100 a month Uber cab credit, so everyone gets to ride in Ubers, and it's not for just to and from work. It's just like when you're out on the town, like you're being taken care of, you know. And it's like we don't have a lot of cash, so we can't do some of the crazier perks.
Right. So it's more creative like stuff.
Yeah, and then everyone gets together and talks about what they would like as little perks. So
cool. Okay.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Nice. All right. So let's go personal. So you're well known. You're financially wealthy. Those are 2 things that a lot of us in this room are looking for, right? You sort of think, okay, those are 2 of my check boxes in my life, and then I'll be happy, or something. Do you find that now that you've achieved that, you are happy?
I don't feel as though, I don't know those were necessarily like check boxes for me per se. Like I felt as though I wanted to get out of debt. I can remember just having like 20 grand in debt and sitting there and just being like, damn, this really sucks. And I had my car repossessed one time, and that really sucked. Not good. So living in San Francisco is extremely tough. When you move out there for the first time and you're making like 30 grand a year, it's like, it's really hard to get by. Wow. I don't think there's nothing really changes. The only things that change, like I feel, once you're making, you know, $75,000 to $100,000 a year, I feel like that provides a certain lifestyle, meaning like you can kind of go out to dinner whenever you want, you can kind of have a glass of wine whenever you want at a restaurant, and so I don't think anything really, you're still drinking the same wine and having the same dinner.
Just less stress.
But there's still I still have the same stress. I still have the same stress when I was working at Tech TV or at Digg or anywhere else. It's the same kind of like, I want my things to go well, and if they don't, you're still stressed out. It has no bearing on how much money you have in the bank.
So what's next on your list then? Like, what are you looking for next?
Well, the thing that's tricky is if you keep looking for that thing, I think that's when you get into this state of unhappiness. Like, I feel as though, you know, I got really lucky and I got a little chunk of money, and then I was able to parlay that into some angel investments that did very well. And then I feel as though, you know, you can either go the route where you start buying the sports cars and start adding them up, and like, I bought a pretty nice car one time, and I was like, oh, I got this freaking fast car, it's awesome. And then like 2 weeks go by, and I'm like, damn, that Ferrari looks pretty cool.
Right. So
and
you
you're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You're like, why am I wasting this money? You know, it's like, so I'm like, I want to get like a Chevy Volt now and like stuff like that. I don't care to like go down that path or have the huge crazy house or.
So materialism, not interested.
Well, I mean, I just feel as though there's certain things where, you know, I love having the latest Apple product. Like, anytime a new Apple laptop comes out, I'm like, I gotta have that. You know, like, there's some kind of Apple device.
Yeah.
And as long as geeks, like, we can do that, like, I'm totally stoked.
That's
like,
all good.
And I don't feel as though you need to go above and beyond that to crazy, like, buying sports teams and crazy. No offense to Gary, because I know he wants the Jets, but.
Besides that. So what about professionally? Do you feel like, you know, you've got something left on your list you need to achieve?
Yeah, I feel as though I've had a bunch of like doubles, not a bunch, but a handful of doubles, and maybe I slid into third base one time, like, you know, and it's like I've had some interesting things that have grown to decent sizes, and I like doing that. I think that's a lot of fun, but I feel like I like projects that may not ever, it doesn't have to be a big project. It just has to be something where at the end of the day I'm really happy about how it turned out.
Right.
And so like I have this little project that I want to do in like I don't know, a year or so. That's like, I'm a big tea drinker. I started drinking tea a while ago. Got into it and got lucky to travel around and try a bunch of different tea. This is really stupid. I don't even know why I'm telling this story, but I want to do this like little tiny like tea holder that's like all like stainless steel metal. And it's like called the gentleman's tea case, and like you pull it out for your little lady, and you like, you screw in the thing and make her tea up. It's lame as hell. I told you guys, but it's like one of those things where like if I did this, I would be like, oh, that's badass. It's like this like little freaking cool thing. You have like your little suit on, you have your little gentleman's tea pouch.
I can see it.
It's weak.
Kinda,
it's weak. I know, but it's like little things like that where like if you do it, like I did this site called We Follow that was at the time. I got lucky and I got to invest in Twitter, and I was telling Ev, I'm like, there's no way for people to find each other on Twitter. It's just horrible. Your directory sucks.
Totally.
And so I built this Twitter directory, and you know, it grew to over 1 million people added themselves manually to the directory, and it's like one of the biggest Twitter directories out there. And that was something that was really fulfilling. You know, I never had plans for it to be some crazy multi-million-dollar company, but I was just like, wow, that's awesome. I built something really fun.
Right.
So if I can continue to do more of that, I'll be pretty stoked.
Cool. So the crazy tea contraption.
Yeah. You'd have to see it. It's much cooler when you actually see it.
That sort of demonstrates you don't feel like you need to do web stuff forever. Like, pretty much it could be.
There's something about tangible products that's pretty cool. Have you seen Handgraft? Like they're really cool.
No.
Oh, you haven't? Dude, go to handgraft.com. Like they have these cool laptop cases. Has anybody seen Handgraft? You know what I'm talking about? A few. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, he knows what I'm talking about. They're really sweet.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, they're these like artisan-made, like leather-stitched, like little beautiful laptop cases.
But that's an example of us. We're trying to claw back the physical world, aren't we? Everything we do is bits and bytes.
Well, that's what's hard. It's finding that balance. That's part of the reason why I got into tea, because at the time I was like, you know, when you're stuck in the middle and there's all this pressure on you from an investment side, and you're running this company that's doing, you know, 35+ million uniques a month, and it's like everything's growing, and dude, it stresses you out, and you have to find that balance. Otherwise, you'll just like, I was getting like heart palpitations, and like you get like heartburn.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what I'm talking about, like throwing conferences, doing this kind of stuff.
Stressful.
So you have to find that balance. Otherwise, you'll get. Yeah.
So this wasn't on my list, but that brings up a good question, which is when you're running a company, and I often feel it's hard because you can't necessarily ask someone else to tell you what to do. You pretty much got to decide. How do you deal with that pressure? when no one's going to tell you what to do. And you basically could flip a coin on a decision because you don't know either. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, typically, like if it's a product decision, we'll be sitting around the table debating it out, and then someone has to make the call. So it's kind of like, it all falls on you.
Yep.
And sometimes it's really tough. I just think if it's web-related stuff and it's really easy to change and test things out, like iOS is a little bit harder. That's one of the things that's been a little bit challenging, is how long it takes to get certain things moved around. In the web, it's like a 10-minute change. So you just kind of have to go with your gut. Like, I'd like to say it's some kind of crazy, complicated, like looking at analytics. I mean, there's certain things like you can A/B test and test out with your users, but
well, I mean, more sort of the emotional side of that. Like, it's like, where do you go to bounce an idea off of? Like, for me, it's Jill, my wife.
Yeah,
right?
Friends, for sure. There's other product people that I really respect, that you have a network of friends that you go to, and you're like, hey, I was thinking about this. What do you think? And you just bounce ideas off them, and they give you feedback. That's why I think it's good to have like a small advisory board that is connected to your company, so that you can have these people on call and just shoot them an email with a screenshot, and I was thinking about this. And when you meet really good product people, you're just like, wow, you could really like help me in certain ways.
And you sort of gave me a little bit of advice yesterday about maybe what kind of percentage you might award advisors. Say if you had a couple of advisors, what was your rough recommendation typically of how much equity you might give them? Like, what's normal? It's
tough because you have people that come in that want to be advisors to certain companies that ask for like a percent plus, like multiple percent. Like, hey, I'll be an advisor, but I'm going to take 5%.
Wow.
And like, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, I think that a typical advisory role, I would say, I've seen go anywhere from like 0.1% to almost 1% if you find they're bringing a lot of value. And then if they're let them prove themselves to you. Like bring them on at a 0.5% if it's someone really senior and you're like, wow, this person's going to be awesome. Have that vesting over a couple of years. Right. And then, if it's 12 months in, you're like, wow, this has opened up so many doors for me. It's awesome. Tack on an extra 0.5%, There's no reason why you can't do that. So.
Right. And what's a good number of advisors to have, or is it totally specific?
I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to do. Like, I think that, I'm pretty happy with Daniel on my team and his design experience and his network of people, so we don't necessarily need anyone from the design side. That said, if we had someone that was really good at, scaling or whatever it may be where you feel that you're weak, that's where I'd try and tap in and bring.
So it really depends where your weaknesses are.
Your weaknesses, and just like, it's always nice to have someone, and this is more from kind of an investment side of the house. Like, I always try to find a couple investors that have some decent pull. So some of our investors in the new company, one of them sits on the board of Facebook, and one of them is the co-founder of Twitter, and like guys like that where you're gonna I can go and tap in to like bigger networks and other people through them. I think is very helpful.
Cool. And what if you're not connected to the person you want to be an advisor? What's typically a good way to get a hold of them?
I'd probably say, I keep saying this over and over again, but a demo is really important. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, hey, I need advice for this or whatever it may be, and like they don't send. I get these emails that are like, I got this crazy idea, I can't talk to you about it. Call me on my cell phone.
No.
And it's like, I did one of those one time,
Didn't work out.
It didn't work out. So it's like, I'd like to see a product, even though if it's in beta or something. And then if they see that there's some type of, I could help this person out, or they have, they just need a little bit of help here, then they'll typically connect up with you.
Well, that kind of leads to my next question, which is, what are the two most common mistakes you see people make when they're pitching to potential investors, sort of in the angel level?
So I just did this startup weekend here in Vegas a couple days ago. I'm sure some of you went to. And it was a lot of fun because it was Tom Anderson, who started MySpace, Tony Hsieh, myself, you were on there. A bunch of us were judging all of these startups. And you remember this. One guy came up and he set down like a 15 to 20 page, it was probably like 20 pages.
It was big.
Document, business plan. And this is like, they have 2 minutes to pitch. And I'm like, there's no way in hell we're ever going to read this through. I'm looking inside of it, and it's like projections for like the next 5 years or whatever. And you just have to be, I hate projections. I think they're so stupid.
Yeah, well, they're always wrong.
They're always wrong. Like, why are you even doing it? 6 months out? Sure, fine. A year? Fine. Anything past that? Are you kidding? Like,
bullshit.
Yeah, it's all bullshit. So save the headache of creating this big elaborate business plan. Create 2 to 3 pages max. and then have a working demo.
Right.
And then I think the other thing too is like, you know, I was sitting down with the founder of Yobongo, which is this like local chat application. And I remember sitting down with him for the first time, and someone's like, you got to meet this guy, he's doing something really cool, blah, blah. And he didn't come with any slides, and he just sat down, and he was so passionate about the space and his product. It just came through, and everything that he was saying.
Right.
And I looked at the app, and I'm like, this is a pretty cool app. And I was like, you know, I don't know that if this is going to be the app that actually takes off, but I know that he will do something amazing. Like, you just know as the person. And he never brought up like projections or anything. He's just like, this is where I think things are going.
Right.
This is how I'm going to try and get there. And this is my demo. And it was like, bam, there's the app right there. And I was like, dude, done. Like, that's awesome. And I think I see more and more startups starting to do that more lightweight, just passionate pitch versus like, and on slide 5, you'll notice that we came from a background of, you know. And it's,
So, but what's interesting about that is you said he was introduced to you.
Right.
So really, you know, he didn't just run up to you and show you his phone and show you a demo. So that would say it's obviously pretty important to figure out how to network you know, through somebody that you know. So.
Yeah, so I mean, I get a lot of emails from like, you know, the Garys and Tim Ferriss and you name it. So the whole thing is like, if you can get in with one of these guys that, you know, you want involved in your business because you've heard they've either done similar deals that are kind of in the space or you just respect what they've built in the past, they typically have a network of people that they can introduce you to, you know, 10 or 15 people that they've worked with in the past that they can pass on the information. It's not to say you'll get everyone to sign up, but at least you'll get your foot in the door.
So do you think that, besides, so big pitch document, bad, what is a good way to send an email that gets people's attention? Say you can't get connected to somebody, what kind of email gets people's attention?
Well, I think that there's a lot of, like, I've gotten emails where, I don't know, I think that I've gotten, people try and guess your email all the time, you know, so you get like, you see like 2 and it's like 30 email addresses that aren't mine and 1 that made it, you know?
That's what Matt said yesterday, he said guess their email.
Yeah, guess your email, but be straight up about it. Like, don't be like, hey, we've crossed paths, and I'm like, I didn't give you my email address because there's like 30 emails on here, you know? And so I've had a couple that are just like, I guess your email, but hey, listen, I just really want to, you know, show you this, and screenshots attached, a working demo attached. Again, less text, the better. And preferably, you know, try and come and see some of these people in person that you want to invest, like meet them at conferences and places where you can get that face-to-face connection.
I agree with that. Yeah, I know that almost everybody that's ever spoken at our shows has met me at some point. It's kind of, it's such a powerful connection.
Absolutely. And have that like pitch down to like, you know, 20 seconds. Oftentimes people walk up and they'll just say, oh, I've got this idea, I want to run it by you, you know, do you have 10 minutes or whatever? And I'm just like, I'm meeting some other people, so not right now, can you email me? And then you'll kind of forget about that. But if they come up and be like, hey, I'm building this app, this is what it does in like 3 sentences, and then, you know, if you can pique that person's interest, you know, they'll want to spend more time with you from that point forward.
Cool, so you have moved on from Digg.
I'm still on the board there, but not day to day.
Got it. So what are a couple lessons that you'd like to share from that experience that you can help all these guys listening, you know, whether that's mistakes or good things, just 2 things you took away?
Yeah, I think that a couple things. Definitely one was that I got, after a couple years in, like 3 years in the company, I had a bunch of other ideas that I wanted to pursue. And I feel as though when things were slowing down from the development side, which was a whole nother can of worms, because we had issues scaling over the years at Digg, I started to do other things and started to spread myself a little bit too thin, and then was kind of in and out of Digg, and I think that really hurt things. I think if I could have stayed a little bit more focused rather than try and take on too much.
Why were you distracted? Was it?
You just have all these ideas, and you're sitting there and you're watching everybody build cool new startups, and it's like, you know, your buddies, like my buddy Joshua, who's the guy that started Delicious, like he started Delicious, sold to Yahoo, worked at Yahoo, left Yahoo, worked at Google, left Google, and is starting something new. And I'm like, I'm at the same job, you know? And they're like, he's doing all this cool stuff. And I'm like, how did that happen? Like, it feels like you just want to do all these different things. And I spread myself a little bit too thin, which definitely hurt. The other thing that was tough is that, you know, it's really tough to stay in front of everything that's going on around you, because like I felt like, you know, Digg had this kind of 4-year run there where we were just growing like crazy. And then all of a sudden we started to see some of our traffic go away to other ways of spreading information online. So there was like, you know, people would be like, oh, I heard this tech news story broke on Twitter and it got retweeted, you know, hundreds of times, blah, blah, and I'm like, tech news stories used to break on Digg, you know? And so, or things would happen through, you know, Facebook or other, and all of a sudden we were like looking at our traffic and it started going down a little bit, then down a little bit more. And then what happened is, you know, you have all these people that have money invested in your company, and they want to see, you know, obviously things back on track and then some. They want to see you continue growing up and to the right. And so from a product standpoint, you know, it's really difficult because it's very easy to do the Me Too thing. Like when you take a look at what happened with Groupon and then, you know, 100 Groupon competitors came out within, like it's very easy for your board and for others to say, hey, look at Digg, why aren't you more like Facebook? Or why aren't you more like, or Twitter, or whatever it may be. Twitter is probably a better example. And so I think from a product standpoint, one of the things that we lost sight of is that we didn't really stay true to our core. Like I think that there was a lot of pressure when traffic started to go down to clean up the site. We had some spam issues, but also a lot of people, a lot of investors, and a lot of people wanted Digg to be a serious site. Like they you know, there was the funny videos and the cats doing backflips off diving boards and shit, and it was like, that's kind of who we were to the core. We had some good politics mixed in there as well. And then there was this push like, well, what if we could get more New York Times stories on the front page and these types of stories and this? We're like, well, what if we do a following type structure? And well, it worked for Twitter. And what if we do mainstream media sources so they don't have to submit their content, so it just automatically comes in. It just makes it so much easier. And it's very easy for these things to get sold on you, especially when traffic's going down. And because you put yourself in like a more of a defensive position where you're like, we need to do something big. Like before at Digg, it was very much like, okay, our comments are good, we can make them better like this. Or the algorithm doesn't work like this, we can make it better like this. And it was like these little tweaks that we did over a series of years, and they worked out well for us. But when there's a lot of pressure around that stuff, it forces your hand a little bit into some more drastic changes. And I think that we did that at the same time while swapping out our entire back end, so we couldn't go back to the old MySQL back end. And so there was a combination of bugs and servers falling over and new features, some that worked, some that didn't. And it was just like this massive beast that just got out there that just blew up.
But, I mean, looking at it in hindsight, I don't think there's anybody that would have not tried to change tactic if your page views were going down. I mean, it'd be hard not to say that. You know, you're basically saying, well, I wish I would have stayed true to the community.
Yeah, but I think I would have tried,
your page views,
rather than just like pull out the entire, you know, rug underneath our users, I think I would have tried individual features one at a time, gauge the feedback with the ability to roll back stuff if it didn't work. Because that's the way we had typically always done it. And that was just something we didn't stay true to this time, which I think really hurt us.
So is it engaging your core community and sort of saying we want to bring you along on this instead of just springing stuff on them?
So we did a beta that was limited to about 500 people or so or something like that. And I just think when you have the size of community that Digg has, it's hard to gauge overall interest in whether they're going to like it or not based on the feedback from a very small select few. So it was something that I think we should have rolled out a little bit wider before doing that stuff. But I mean, the good news is that you know, the plan was always for me to bring on another CEO because I never wanted to be CEO of Digg, just because it was so big and it was just not something I wanted to do. Having spent already 6 years there, you know. So we brought Matt Williams on. He then, you know, we sat down and we were like, okay, this is what the community doesn't like. We got to go back and fix a lot of these features. I would say like they're 80% of the way there. And finally, the last couple months, traffic has ticked back up. So it's right around 20 million uniques right now. But it was 35 or something like that. So, I mean, it's tricky though, because like, you know, 20 million uniques, double digits of millions of dollars in revenue per year. So it's still a good business, but you know, will it ever be Facebook big or Twitter big? Like that's the hard thing to figure out from here.
But part of that, but even that question, I think reveals the pressure of, I don't know if it's because you're in Silicon Valley or if it's because you're in the same vertical, but that pressure to be Facebook. I mean, you know what I mean? It's
well, especially when you raise that much cash.
Right.
Because you have to go back and look and say, okay, Digg's raised, you know, 38 million or something over the course of those 5 years.
Right.
Like, to get a proper exit there, you're talking about $150+ million acquisition, and it's like, you know, it's not that today, you know. So it's like, how do you build to get back up there and then some for the investors?
That's interesting because, so do you feel that if you go out and raise money, you know, in a VC A round, so we're talking, you know, sort of 10 million plus type thing, that you have to be prepared to soldier on until your company is a $100 million company? I mean, because that, and if you're not, then you should basically say, whoa, like, maybe I don't want that kind of company. Maybe I don't. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the reason why I just raised a tiny bit of cash for this company, is that I wanted to keep the team extremely small. It's 6 people. We have a ton of runway for figuring things out.
That sounds nice to me.
It's nice. It's nice. We have no board. I can just basically control and do anything I want, which is nice. So, you know, it's tricky. There's certain times when you absolutely need capital. You know, and there's other times where the cool thing now is I see so many startups that are doing iOS-related stuff with they're actually making money on their apps, and like, you know, they raise a small round and they're profitable and everything's good, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the new direction I want to take.
Well, I think we're, you know, impressed with all your career. I mean, you've been up and down, and you've ended up winning a lot, and I think we're all pretty impressed.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been fun.
But thanks for coming to the show.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right.